Hi there, I'm Eric Wordweaver Sjerven, Goalie of the Ridgar folk here in East Texas, and I'd like to welcome you to Raving Reviews. This is a show where I ramble on about different media and review stuff, and it's more laid back than my other channels, so my other shows. So there's less editing and a lot more just kind of letting things flow and talk about movies and video games and comics, and you get to see me geek out for a little bit. So you guys know the drill. Subscribe, ding the bell. Contact information's in the description. We're not going to go into all the details on that. If I'm staring off in the distance over here, it's because I have my computer screen up and I'm pulling details for the review that I'm giving you. Because, I want to be accurate on a few things here. So, there you go. All right, guys, let's talk about today's movie. Yes, I am still on movies, I promise. I will get to some of the other media here coming up. I just have a whole lot of movies I want to talk about. Because I'm a movie guy. I love movies. Books, too. Comics, everything, video games. Oh, video games is fun. Wait till we get to some of that. That's neat. So, I like movies because it's a way to actually watch some heathen elements play out in demonstration when you can find them. All right? Now, today we are looking at what's called Curse of the Ring. I say this because the copy of the movie that I have is actually called Dark Kingdom. Why? I'm not entirely certain. I think Curse of the Ring is its European release name, the official release name. It was also titled Ring of the Nibelungs in its original title. How I found a copy of it under the title of Dark Kingdom, I've not completely figured out yet. I think that has a lot to do with the American release element. So, okay. This movie is fascinating, guys. This one I am going to tell you up front, I recommend this as a watch. I absolutely recommend this as a watch because you need to see it, all right? The movie stars Benno Firmin and Kristana Loken, name you should recognize, Alicia Witt, Julian Sands, Samuel West, Max von Sydow plays Raving. Robert Pattinson's in this movie. Robert Pattinson's in this movie? Oh, I forgot about that. Anyway, and then a bunch of names that you'll see when you get in there. Now, this movie is fascinating. You're all familiar, at least you should be, if you've done any of the heathen studies and whatnot, you should be familiar at least with the name of the Saga of the Volsungs, or Sigurd the Dragon Slayer, Sigurd the Volsung. The story has two different versions. There is Sigurd the Volsung, which appears in the Volsunga Saga, which is in the Scandinavian sources. Then from the mainland, there is, I want to say, a medieval German text. I think it was medieval. I gotta go back and look at the date. Called the Nibelungenlied. And yes, I know I'm butchering that. But that's another one of those that you haven't really heard said by an actual native language speaker. You just kind of go with what you got. It could be lied, it could be lied. I don't know. Anyway, it is the Curse of the Nibelungs, or the Ring of the Nibelungs. And it is the same story, but in the Norse basis, it's not the exact same story, but it's the same story. And there's some elements that are decidedly different. In the Norse sources, you have Sigurd and Brunhild, and you still have Brunhild in this version, but you have Siegfried, which you will see reference in video games and other things of a mythic kind of German Superman swordsman named Siegfried. And this is what it's referencing. It is referencing this character right here. It is, of the lines that are attested in some of the olden sources, the Volsungs were said to be sired by Odin himself. So he's kind of the Hercules of Norse mythology in that he's kind of superhuman. There are definitely some superhuman elements to his story and his legend. And he's descended from the gods, specifically the Allfather. So there's a lot of correlation, at least on a superficial level, between Sigurd and Heracles. when you get down into the actual stories, they differ significantly. But as far as that scion of the primary god of the pantheon, then yeah, there's some, ostensible correlations. So, Benno Furman plays Siegfried, and does a pretty good job on it. Kristana Loken plays Brunhild, and does as good a job as Kristana Loken can. I'll tell you this, I'm not the hugest fan of Kristana Loken as far as her acting goes. But there's still something endearing about Kristana that I like. I genuinely just enjoy seeing Kristana in movies. If anybody's seen Blood Rain, she's not the greatest of actresses. But she gives it her all whenever she goes into something. And for some reason, she gets Brunhild in this particular movie. I like her telling of Brunhild. Is it spot on to what I think is necessarily, how Brunhild is in the source material? No. But I like her version. Doesn't mean I think it's the, end-all be-all version, if it's the definitive version, but I do like it. I do enjoy it. Similarly, I like Benno's Siegfried, or he's also known as Eric at one point in time, because he's kind of undercover. It's actually, there's a period where he doesn't know who he is, but I kind of have to tell you who he is, because it's important to be able to talk about any of it, and it's kind of in the title of the thing, the whole, Ring of the Nibelung. It's kind of obvious it's about Siegfried. So, yeah. It's interesting because they change a lot of things as far as some of the basic elements of the story. The Norse Icelandic side of things, I liked the Volsunga Saga because it was out there with its mystical elements. I mean, hell, there's one period in time where most of a family is eaten by wolves. It's crazy. It's out there, and they don't care. When he slays a dragon, they don't care. Now, the Nibelungenlied is tied to Wagner's Ring cycle of operas. If you are familiar with that, Wagner's the reason that we have winged helmets. Wagner's the reason that we have, the fat lady singing in opera, in the Valkyrie outfit and all that. Yeah, that's Wagner's work right there, guys. And Wagner's work was done as an homage to the Norse mythology. He goes through and he tells the story of the gods in a series of 4 operas that all connect to one another and tell one giant story. And one of those operas centers around the Nibelung, the Ring of the Nibelung. And it's the story of, it looks at the story of the gods when Odin and Loki go and end up accidentally slaying a giant, and they incur the price of having to get enough gold to cover his entire carcass. They go to the rivers and they find this stash of Rhine gold. Long story, too long for this kind of a review. But anyway, they bring it back. It ends up being cursed because of some shenanigans there, mostly Loki's fault. And then it goes on to be cursed to bring death to whomever is the holder of this treasure in the future. They gave the treasure to the giants. The giants end up fighting over it. They kill their father, Fafnir. One of the giants takes the gold and secludes himself into a cave with his horde and becomes a dragon. Shape-shifting element. This is a key thing because they skip over the tie to the gods, they skip over the tie to the giants, and Fafnir is just a dragon in this. So you don't see that element tied to the actual mythology aspects. You only see the ties to, Fafnir the dragon. And so, and again, you go back to different sources and stuff, how much of it actually comes from Wagner and how much of it comes from others. And I'm giving you the gist on how the story kind of came to where it is in this movie. Okay? So, in all of that, what you end up with in the end is an interesting little telling of the Nibelungenlied from a kind of fantasy-esque kind of made for sci-fi movie sort of quality to it. The acting is ho-hum. The pacing is okay. It gets slow in parts. It really does. It almost looks like it was filmed in cheesecloth. It is 3 hours and 4 minutes long. That is a long movie for this kind of a movie. But it kind of needs to be that way. It was a made-for-TV movie, which means it was probably done as a miniseries, would be my guess, or in 2 parts, would be my guess. I don't know for certain. I'm sure I could click on one of these buttons here and it would tell me, but I'm not going down that far in the rabbit hole at the moment. It came out in 2004, and it's enjoyable. I really do enjoy it. How deep does it go into heathenry, per se? Not real deep. There are some heathen elements to it if you look in relation to things like the lordship and stuff like that. Mostly it's a tie to the mythology, and it's a retelling of this Germanic Norse Superman and his story, and kind of how he ends up where he is. For those that don't know, Brunhild is a Valkyrie who is in the Volsunga saga. She goes against Odin and his decision, because he tells her to go out and pick a family in a war to favor over the other, and she disagrees with this, and so she goes against Odin's edict, and in the end is cast out. She's punished, so she is, in the story, set up on top of a mountain with a ring of fire around her, and she is cursed to remain there until a champion can come across and brave the fire. And there's a whole deal with how that ends up, and special horse, descendant of Sleipnir, magic sword, all that fun stuff. I love the Volsunga saga because it really plays up because it's the mythology. It's in there, so it really plays up those elements. The telling that is in this movie is a much grittier, much more down-to-earth, much less fantastic. Matter of fact, there's only a few fantastic elements to it, just kind of speckled in here. There's the dragon element. You do get to see the Nibelung in a time or two. There is an element of magic to a couple of points. Everything kind of goes south later on, though, because those that know the story, you know that Sigurd or Siegfried gets a special reward for when he slays the dragon. I will give you that he slays the dragon up to that point because he's known as Sigurd the Dragon Slayer. If you haven't read it, if you haven't watched the movie yet, I won't spoil that for you. I'll just let you know he gets a special reward, and that makes him particularly coveted when he comes back to the Burgons, or this kingdom that he finds himself in, and that he finds himself sworn blood brotherhood to in it. And so there's some interesting elements to all of that, how that plays out, and that kicks off the drama for the rest of the story. This is not one of those movies that is a happy ending kind of movie. I will tell you that to begin with. It is not one of those that's... I'm not going to tell you too much about it. I'm just going to let you know it's gritty. So don't go in expecting like rom-com type happy ending, okay? Go in expecting gritty telling. And you will not be disappointed in the end, I don't think. If you expect kind of made for sci-fi level of everything else, because it's definitely made for sci-fi on the CGI with the dragon. So overall, heathen elements to it, there's really not a whole lot, because they don't really delve into a lot of the mythology side of things. They don't really delve into some of the more strong heathen elements for us, heathen culture and things like that. It's not like the Icelandic sagas or Viking sagas, which I reviewed, where you feel like you're in a saga and there's some very strong cultural stuff there. It's not like some of the other movies that I will talk about where there's a very strong religious presence or a very strong presence of the mythology. This is very strong telling of Siegfried from the Nibelungenlied, but it is not really a heathen kind of thing so much as just a Siegfried thing. So make of it what you will. There are some elements to it, but it's not huge. The biggest thing is that Siegfried and Brunhild represent old world stuff. They are still tied to the old gods, and so their ways are of the old ways. And so it's this kind of juxtaposition of the old ways of heathen era versus kind of the more medieval era. And so, but even then, it's not perfectly nailed. But it is fun. It is enjoyable. If you aren't familiar with the story of the Volsungs or the Nibelungenlied, you could watch this and become at least familiar with some of the names involved. Because you will definitely see some characters that play out in the story that are huge in the actual story itself. I mean, you look at Hagen and Kriemhild and Gunther and all these different characters that play out. Yeah, you need to see these. They are a very much part of the saga itself, the Volsunga saga or the Nibelungenlied itself. So there's some strong stuff there as far as that goes. It'll give you something of a visual representation that you can go off of if you have a hard time putting kind of framework to mind. However, it doesn't hold up as far as time period goes because there's not really anything in the old story to tie it to, the kind of time frame that they are. The aesthetic works. I mean, it's mythic story, so you end up with the same kind of deal of the time frame doesn't really matter as much as the interactions, the actions, and the story that they're telling. So, you're okay there, I think. As long as you're not trying to nail it for historical accuracy on costumes. I mean, suspend disbelief as far as the time frame goes. It's a thing. But it is a fun film. It's enjoyable. The cast is actually pretty decent, which means some of the acting is okay and some of it is not. So you would expect that from this. Choreography, not so hot. Not so hot. I mean, it's not Viking Saga's bad. That was so bad it was endearing. This is just kind of Hercules and Xena kind of bad. It's there. It's not great, but it is what it is. Horribly telegraphed and doesn't flow particularly well. But it's still, there's elements of action, but the action isn't the main thing on this particular movie. It's the story, it's the legend, and watching all of that play out. So yeah, that's kind of the gist of that. Like I said, the version that I watched was called Dark Kingdom. I believe its official story, its official original title was Ring of the Nibelungs. And its release title, I think in Europe at least, was Curse of the Ring. So if you're going to look it up on IMDb, if you're going to look up any of the posters and whatnot, which the poster I'll probably use as the splash card for this one, will be the Curse of the Ring title, because that's just what you've got. And then the subtitle, of course, is Ring of the Nibelungs. So yeah, it's cool to see, Kristanna Loken, Julian Sands, and Max von Sydow in this kind of a film. I really enjoyed that. If those names don't mean anything to you, it's just because you don't run in the same kind of movie cult circles that I do. But it's cool to see them in something like this. So anyway, this one out of 10, I would give it probably a 7. It's enjoyable as far as the story goes. The elements that are there are fun. They're neat to look at. I do go back and watch this one periodically just because I enjoy it. And I like to see Kristanna Loken as Brunhild. I like to see the telling of this story because this story doesn't get told a lot. When I sit down with people and I show them my heathen movie library, this is usually one of the ones that I pull out and show them. There's a few more that are like, you got to see this, you got to see this, you got to see this. Some of them, they're so bad, they're endearingly awesome. Some of them, it's like the Viking sagas, where it's like, you have to watch this for what it is. It's beautiful. This is one I put in there just because it's a telling of the Siegfried story in a movie. That alone in of itself is nice. You don't get a whole lot of that. And it's one I can't believe I stumbled across in like a bargain bin or something stupid like that. I tripped over this one and snatched it up, and I've enjoyed it ever since. Keep continuing to watch it. But yeah, never made it big. Made for TV. I probably found it in a bargain bin at Walmart or something like that. But I do recommend giving it a watch. This is one that I would recommend. Give it a watch. Just don't try and don't watch it when you got a time crunch. Like I said, it is 3 hours long. This is the kind of movie you could probably take a break in the middle and come back to just fine without losing too terribly much. But there is a lot going on. the storytelling on it's pretty decent. So I liked it. I enjoyed it. So there you go. If you guys have any questions or anything, if you guys want to tell me what you thought about the movie, jump in down below. I realize a lot of people are going to be like, that was crap. I can't believe that. That's nothing like that. No, look, I realize it's not spot on to the Nibelung and the Aid. I realize they take a lot of liberties. But thematically and spiritually, it's kind of there. Okay, I mean, it's a telling of that, and they get the spirit of certain elements of it fairly well. And then there's certain elements it's just kind of neat to watch play out on the big screen. So there you go. All right, guys, thank you guys. Appreciate it. Hail to you all. Thank you ever so much for watching these. I hope you enjoy them, and may your hearth fires burn bright. We're back. We're going to do Curse of the Ring, or The Dark Kingdom. This one should be fun. I think so. I hope so. We'll see. And we're in 3, 2, 1. Let's jam.